When you're a queer person or a transgender person, the one thing they tell you is like, no one's going to marry you. No one's going to marry you. You're not going to find anyone. So you have this thing that just keeps ringing in your head and you want to prove to people that like, actually, no, I will find someone.
Yeah.
I find people who are okay with me being transgender, but I'm not okay with them being a loser. Like I never, do you know what I mean? Like guys go on dating apps like this. So they swipe on everyone. And there's been times where like I've spoken to this guy for hours and I'm like, oh my God, this is really nice. And then he says, oh, I just read your bio. As a transgender woman especially, I think you will meet so many men who will have everything that it takes to be a lover and nothing of what it takes to be a partner. I've never known that somebody else's name or somebody else's honor could be in my body.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Love Handle, where we get unfiltered about love and relationships. Today, I am pleased to invite Ella to the podcast. Ella, can you introduce yourself, please?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Ella. I'm 21 years old and I'm a content creator. And I also do YouTube videos about, my relationship experiences and life advice as a person who's grown up transgender in this country.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So let's start by getting a gauge on what space you're in right now regarding dating.
You guys probably don't know, but it's Valentine's Day today. And this is the only thing that I have planned for the day. So that tells you what space I'm in right now. So I'm like a serial monogamous. So it's like either I'm seeing someone and then dating them and then talking to someone to get over them. And then I realized that was sort of becoming a problem. So right now I'm currently for the first time just taking a break in my life. Yeah.
And how has that been so far, like embracing singlehood?
So it's not pretty initially, but it has been great because I do realize how many hours actually are there in a day. You never realize when you're like, until you're really alone, that how much time you actually have. Now that I look back at it, I realize my intentions behind dating, as much as it was to find people, it was also to sort of prove this point. Because especially when you're a queer person or a transgender person, the one thing they tell you is like, no one's going to marry you. No one's going to marry you. You're not going to find anyone. So you have this sort of thing that just keeps ringing in your head and you want to prove to people that like, actually, no, I will find someone.
Yeah.
So I think I'm sort of trying to understand what my intentions are. Like, what am I even looking for in a person? Like, am I being with someone because I like them, or do I need to prove a point? It's a whole conversation.
What would you say is like your biggest takeaway from dating as a trans person? What is the reception generally when you're meeting people and sharing this side of yourself?
Once you've been around enough and you've met enough people and you've had time with yourself, you'll realize that your gender is the least important part of it all.
Yeah.
Like before I transitioned, it was all I could think about.
Yeah.
And before I actually got into relationships, my whole central thing was, okay, this person just needs to accept me for being transgender. And that's the only problem that there was ever going to be in the relationship, is like, do they approve of me or do they not approve of me? Does this work or does this not work? But then I find people who are okay with me being transgender, but I'm not okay with them being a loser. Like I never, do you know what I mean? Like I didn't realize for the longest time, like I feel like a lot of transgender people or people just generally who have this low self-esteem, I feel like the only thing you look for in people is for them to want you.
Are they going to like me? But do I even like them to
And then when you be with enough people, you realize, oh, actually I do have, a type, I do have preferences, I do have non-negotiables and all of these things.
So what are the preferences that you have in a partner? What are you looking for?
The way that I've lived my life, I've had to go against everyone. I've had to go against my family, my friends. So I have just become a very resilient person in that way. And I need someone who's equally confident like that. I didn't value that for the longest time. I didn't realize how important it was for me to have someone who, is in control of their life. Most guys my age, I'm 21, and they're still in the figuring it out stage, and the parents' approval is a big thing. So I really value someone who's independent in that way.
Okay.
So like financially independent, but like about your opinions. Do you have your own thoughts? Do you have your own opinions? Or do you just say things whatever your friends think is cool? Or do you think in a way that only your parents would approve in? So I think independence is something that I've really come to value.
Yeah, someone who can really stand their own.
Yeah, and honesty, I think, because like this is me living my truth. Like you can't lie. I think that's one thing about being transgender is like, if you are going to go down this path, you cannot lie. You have to be strong. You have to be honest. And if you don't do that, you don't get to be yourself. If I was going to live a lie, I was not going to be able to live the life that I'm living right now. I would not have been able to, have healthy relationships with my parents. I would not have been able to transition my medication, my career. None of that wouldn't have come if I wasn't bold enough to be honest.
Right.
So I think honesty is also really, really big.
Yeah. Someone who can be authentic in their self too, because you are so authentic to who you are.
Yes. And communicating honesty as well.
Gender is actually much more secondary than maybe we would assume, right? When you're talking to people. How do you gauge that someone whom you're maybe speaking to worthy of you sharing this part? And at what point in the talking journey do you actually open up about this side of yourself?
Just for my own safety, physical and emotional. I've never really been in the organic dating space. For me, it's happened all on the apps. A, because it's convenient for me, and for the longest time, I did not leave my house. And I only started dating properly after my transition, which happened in the lockdown. So leaving the home wasn't a thing. So it's really been on the apps, and I just have to get it out the first thing. So it's in my bio. That's the gender I put. I put transgender woman everywhere. If anyone asks, like, it's really not something that I'm uncomfortable with, and I don't mind sharing it with people that I'm interested in dating, because I feel like it's relevant. Just
Right
saves
out
me
the
time.
gate. Yeah, and you can filter out like the haters and losers.
Because I've had moments where guys, okay, so like I said, I've always had it in my bios, but guys aren't like reading bios. Guys go on dating apps like this. So they swipe on everyone. And there's been times where like I've spoken to this guy for hours and I'm like, oh my God, this is really nice. And then he says, oh, I just read your bio. And then it's like, oh no, I was starting to like this person and this is not going to work anymore. So I just save myself the mini heartbreak.
For sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, dating is very challenging across the board. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you do face dating, particularly as a trans woman?
I was the kind of person who believed that all it takes for a relationship to work is two people. And I never believed the whole idea of like, oh, you have to think about the family or you have to think about the friends. Now I've realized that those things are really important. And, you have to understand that sometimes people will love you deeply, but they just wouldn't be able to be with you because their family isn't okay. And I think you will meet so many men who will have everything that it takes to be a lover and nothing of what it takes to be a partner. All I have to offer is love. Like I cannot give you status. Like people are gonna have negative things to say. So that means whoever chooses me will want me truly, because there's nothing else to offer other than love. And that's all I want.
That's true. I mean, I think you do have a lot more to offer. I think you could potentially offer status as well. But then, yes, obviously, people really have to love you for you and commit to that, because they have to anticipate that there will be pushback from society at some level, right? Do you find that Indian society as a whole is evolving to being much more inclusive than in the past?
So I would say it definitely is. And as much as I would like to say that it's maybe regressive or not the best state, but like we have to acknowledge the fact that I'm right here. My family is an Indian family. And if even one family has been able to do what my family has done, that is a sign of growth. Of course, it's not very steady and it's not very significant, but things are changing. The way I've seen conversations change within my own family, I'm always hopeful. But then again, I have an education. I look a certain way. I come from privilege. So I've really not been exposed to a lot of what is out there.
Heartbreak is something that affects everyone in different ways, but it all affects all of us so profoundly. How do you grapple with heartbreak, and how have you maintained your hope and optimism in spite of that?
So heartbreak was never something that I was comfortable with initially. I never got into relationships expecting them to end. I think I date to marry and we have to get married next week. That's really, the intention and the way that my brain works. And I, for the longest time, even until now, is I saw the world as very black and white. And that's why when relationships end, I felt really, really horrible, because the dilemma that was in my mind was so it wasn't love. Because in my definition of love is happily ever after. So if we didn't get married and have babies, that means it wasn't love. What really helps me to, deal with heartbreak is to understand that love can be momentary and it can exist for a moment and it can have a shelf life or a timeline. And I think just because it didn't end in marriage or whatever your idea of the happily ever after is, doesn't mean it's not love. And all my heartbreaks, if anything, have been lessons. I get skinnier every single time, first of all. That's
the glow up is so good.
So the glow up gets me in check.
You very rightly said, no love given was wasted, right? You felt that love, you gave that love, and at that point of time, maybe that person needed it.
Every time there's any sort of loss in my life, I just like to mentally think that okay, this is a redirection. This is a redirection.
Yes.
I'm being taken to my purpose.
We have a lot of single people in our audience. We may have several trans people watching in our audience. What advice would you give single, young, trans people who are longing for a love connection, but are, still perhaps working on embracing themselves or going through the transition?
Before I transitioned, I was so focused on okay, my gender, my identity, my medicine, my hormones and all these things. And then once all of that was figured, I had this breakdown because I was I have everything and I'm still sad because there was trauma, there was depression and anxiety and PTSD of all that other stuff that happened.
Right.
And then you realize that your gender, that's an easy fix. There's so much stuff you're carrying that you're not even looking at because you're so hyper fixated on your gender. So I think focus on healing the parts that you're not able to see right now. And when it comes to dating, one of the most important skills of having a good relationship or finding good people is to be able to leave.
Yes.
And I didn't know how to do that for the longest time. Even until my last date, I have to be left. Even if a guy is like being horrible to me, but he says he wants me, that's enough for me to stay.
Yeah.
I really just don't know how to leave because I feel like I'm ready to leave. And then that ties into the self-esteem point.
Exactly.
Because like,
you never want to be dependent on another person.
Right.
I feel like you and I are the same person. It's so hard to walk away from a situation when you feel like their validation and them telling you that you're worthy of love is the only way that you believe it. Right?
Or when you feel like you can make it work. Like, do you stay stuck on guys because you see potential?
Obviously.
I'll change your life right now.
I'm a fixer. I will.
No. I'll tell you right now. The potential you see in them is your potential. Exactly. So it's not what that guy can do or what that guy can be. It's like if you were in his situation, you would have done way better than him.
Yeah.
So we talk about like projecting insecurities and making fun of people or, making fun of their success because you're insecure. But people project their good qualities as well. Like that's what I realized for the longest time. Like half of these losers, like I make them so special in my eyes and my aura.
So special.
And then you have to put them down from the pedestal. So like if you're someone who's stuck because you see potential, that's you. You can make any other guy special.
They sparkle because we make them sparkle.
That's why when you meet them again after a really long time, you're just like, oh,
that's it.
Yeah.
That's what I was going. Is there any like major red flag that you see on a first date that's instant like deal breaker?
I think when people make fun of you, I don't like that humor at all.
Yeah.
Like I feel like you have to get to a certain level to be comfortable like that. Like on the first date, it's not appropriate. And also when people like talk about their exes. So I think somebody who really talks bad about their ex on the first date is a little... Yeah.
Who should pay on the first date?
Him if I like him and me if I don't like him. If I don't like the guy, like I make sure I pay and then I leave so there's no strings attached and all.
Yeah.
But I think a guy should like, why not? My makeup was really expensive. Do you know what I mean? Like it cost me a lot mentally to curl my hair. That's a breakdown. So he can pay, it's fine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what would you say to the people who say like guys also get ready? They also spend money on themselves.
They don't look as good.
It's true.
Sorry.
Do better. Do you think a guy and a girl can be platonic friends ever?
Yeah, but they can't be best friends.
Tell me more.
I mean, they can be best friends, but that's not going to be my boyfriend. So I think the girl can be friends with the guy. I think guys can't be friends with girls. Like that's what I've seen really. Like every single time I've met a guy and a girl who are best friends, the girl is the best friend and the guy is waiting. So I don't know. I've never seen it work for me. So
yeah, that's so scary.
Yeah.
Does a guy's income matter to you? And if so, how much?
It does matter now for men, especially in this country, to be able to take a stand against their family or do anything independently. Like financial independence does matter because I was in relationships with people where, the family used that against them, where they were like, if you continue to be with this girl, we're going to cut you off financially.
Interesting. What's the most meaningful act of love that you've ever experienced?
I think when people are honest with you. I think when people are like saying things that you don't want to hear. I think people can say nice things and people can hype you up all they want. But I think calling each other out, that's one thing that I really, really value. Even in like platonic friendships is like where we can call each other out and hold each other accountable. I think that's the deepest form of love because that means you want greater good for that person.
So one thing I'm curious about, so much of our perception of love and relationships comes from our conditioning, like our cultural, social, emotional conditioning that we got when we were very young, right? And obviously as a trans person, like the messaging that you got was dedicated towards like a different gender at the time. I'm curious to know, like, do you feel like since transitioning, the messaging or conditioning from society has also changed? The expectations as a woman, especially in romantic context, has that changed?
Before I transitioned and I was a boy, my dad was driving me to my female friend's place at the time. And he was really like proud of me. And he was like, my son's going over to a girl's place. And then now post transition, when I wanted to go out with a guy, my dad was like losing his mind. He was like, what are you doing? Like, everyone's going to see this. So I think even the fact that, you know, how men are expected to deal with dating and how women are expected to deal with dating, it's really different. Like, I've never known that somebody else's name or somebody else's honor could be in my body. Like, I've never. So like earlier you could, you know, wear shorts, wear t-shirts, wear whatever. And now like I can't wear deep neck because that somehow
a reflection
affects my
of your
family's
family.
honor. Yeah. But that's again just how women and men are seen.
Yeah.
So my name is Ella, which comes from Cinderella. So I'm a girl who grew up on fairy tales. That's really, really something that's just been a part of my life, and Bollywood and fairy tales. And because I've had a life where I've seen struggle, I was sort of waiting for my happily ever after, because I was like, okay, so how does the fairy tale work? Like, there's a girl who struggles and then she works really hard, she continues being kind, and then in the end the prince comes and there's happily ever after. And then I've had princes come, but the happily ever after hasn't. And so that was really shocking for me. But I was never taught to see relationships as temporary. So I think I was really in this like high of fairy tales in Bollywood, and this weird conditioning of like, you know, everything is magical and everything is rainbows and sunshine. So like literally Disney movies ruined me.
Or is it the people who just aren't able to live up to that?
Right? Like
you can give someone else their fairy tale.
Yeah.
Right? So why can't they give that to you?
But you know, that's another thing that I really like is like sometimes when I'm getting hopeless and I'm like, oh my God, why am I not finding people who think like me? I like to humble myself and think I'm not that special. There is no way that God only made one of me who thinks like this. Like if I can think like this, that means the same thought and the same vibration and the same frequency must exist somewhere in a partner for me. So like every time you feel lonely because you feel like there's people who don't get you, there are. You just haven't met them yet.
I mean, I would reframe that like you are special, but there are also people who are just as special,
Right.
who are like going to bring their own unique sparkle, magic, rainbow, butterflies to your life, because that's what you do to other people. You know, what a nice note to close on.
Right.
We're going to find our fairy tales. You're going to find your fairy tale.
Right. Somebody's going to come put that shoe on you.
Yeah.
Just hold on.
Thank you so much for watching another episode of Love Handle. If you enjoyed the episode, do be sure to hit subscribe, share this video with your friends, and leave in the comment below who we should have on next. So much, Ella, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.